Hi everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Calla Patterns and welcome to video 4 for the Amaryllis Tote. At this point we're ready to attach our strap connectors. I'm just going to get some double-sided tape and I will start with the front panel. Now, in the last video we made marks on our fabric where we need to install our strap connectors. There should be two dots, and in terms of placement, I'm just going to add some double-sided tape here to the wrong side. I like to use the double-sided tape just because it keeps the connector in place while I'm sewing it. And I'm also going to take these off because the glue should be dry by now. So I want the top edge of the strap connector to be lined up with those two dots. So there should be one dot on this corner and another dot on this corner. And then make sure your connector is straight and just use the double-sided tape to keep it in place. Now, one important thing when you're sewing the connectors on your front, you do have these zipper pocket lining pieces. You want to flip those so they're out of the way. We don't want to sew them. And then you're going to go over to your machine and sew your strap connector in place. I'm going to switch my camera over to the machine so you can see me sewing these on. But what we will do is start at this top corner just beneath the rectangle ring. And we're going to sew across the connector beneath the rectangle ring, and then very slowly we're going to sew along this rounded edge of the strap connector with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then when we get to the corner where we started, we're going to backstitch. You should also be doing a backstitch. I usually just backstitch one stitch length when you start and when you stop sewing. Okay, so the lining pieces are out of the way and I'm starting at the top left corner of the connector. And I'm just going to do one stitch and then back stitch. And then I'm going to sew across the bottom here, just beneath the rectangle ring, all the way across. Okay, and now I'm at the other top corner, so I'm just going to lift the foot and rotate, and now I'm going to sew very slowly around this curved edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And then when I get to the top corner where I started, I'm just going to backstitch again. And then, I don't know if you can see, there you go. You can still see the little indentations from my Wonder Clips, but those will actually go away. I had them on overnight, but anyways, you can see the stitching. Okay, so I have all 4 strap connectors installed. Now is the time to add rivets if that's something that you would like to do. If not, you do not have to. I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to actually set some rivets in each of my connectors, and then we're going to start assembling all of our panels together for the exterior of the bag. Okay, all my rivets are set, and now we get to the fun part, putting all of the various pieces together. So again, just move your lining piece out of the way and take one side panel and line up those angled edges together. And use some clips to clip them together. Okay, and then you're going to go and sew them together with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and make sure you backstitch at the top and the bottom. Okay, so I've sewn one side panel to my front panel, and now I'm going to press the seam allowance towards the front panel. Okay, and then I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to top stitch the seam allowance all along here on the front panel's side, not the side where the side panel where you have your pocket, but on the front panel. Okay, I just top stitched the seam allowance along the edge here, and I'm going to repeat exactly what I just did, and I'm going to attach the second side panel to the other side of my front panel. I'm going to press the seam allowance towards the front panel and then top stitch that seam allowance. Once that is done, we'll attach the back panel to the edges here of my side panels. Okay, both side panels are attached to our front panel. Now we'll just take our back panel, and we're doing exactly the same thing, and we're going to sew these edges together and then press your seam allowance this time towards the back panel, and then top stitch the seam allowance along the back panel. And then once that is done, you're going to repeat and attach the remaining two sides together of the other side of your back panel and the remaining side of one of your side panels. Again, you're doing exactly the same thing. You're sewing them together. Press the seam allowance towards the back panel and then top stitch that seam allowance. Now, when you get to that last seam, it's going to be a little bit tricky to do the top stitching because you're going to have this giant tube. So just take your time and don't rush it so that you can have a nice, some nice top stitching. Okay, so here's where we should be at this point. We have a giant tube of fabric, okay? This is what it should look like. So now we're going to do the pleats at the bottom. So if you turn it wrong side facing out and think about each panel, so the front panel, the back panel, and each side panel as having a set of pleats. Each set of pleats has that center mark that we made, and that'll be used when we're attaching the bottom. And then it should have two sets of marks on either side. So I do not, because these are only going to be 1/4 inch pleats, I do not bother pinning them or clipping them. It's just way too small, way too fussy, and it's very time consuming. What I will actually do is I'll go over to my machine and I'll set it to a basting stitch length. And I try to focus, when you're doing the pleats, focus on one panel at a time. So every pleat that you see should always be pleated towards the center mark. So these first two pleats, they should be pinched. So you pinch at the first mark and fold over so that the two marks meet. So you can see it's actually a really tiny little pleat. Pinning those or clipping those is just way too fussy. So what you want to do instead is just bring it over to your machine, set your machine to a basting stitch length, pinch about 1/4 inch at that first pleat mark and fold it over so that it meets the second pleat mark. And you're pleating and you're sewing at the same time. So now you do your basting stitch over this first pleat. You get to the second one and you do the same thing. You pinch at the first mark about 1/4 inch, and then you fold it over so that it rests on the first mark rests on the second mark. Then you pass the center mark. These pleats need to go in a different direction. So as you're getting to the first set of pleats, ignore the step, skip the first pleat mark, go to the second, pinch at that spot, and this time you're folding towards the center mark. Do the same thing for this one. Skip the first pleat mark, grab the second one, pinch, and fold towards this pleat mark. Okay, and you're folding towards the center. Do exactly the same thing for every set of pleats on each panel. So this side panel, you should have 2 pleats folded towards the center, and these 2 pleats folded towards the center. And just repeat it until you finish the entire bottom of the bag. So I'm gonna go do my pleats, and then I'll come and I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done. Okay, so all of my pleating is done. We're looking at the bottom edge of the bag. Now if we just look at the back panel, so I'm not sure, hopefully you can see this. I have my center mark here, and then I have 2 pleats on this side that are folded towards the center, and then 2 pleats folded this way towards the center. And you're doing the same thing at the bottom of each panel. Now, there is a great benefit to a pleated bottom. Now, normally when you have a bottom like this and you're trying to attach it, you have to have been really precise with your seam allowance when you're attaching the panels so that this is exactly the same length as the exterior edge of your bottom. But with pleats, it's much more forgiving, because if you were a little bit inaccurate with your seam allowance, it doesn't matter, because we just attach these pleats with a basting stitch. So what we'll do is you take some of the basting stitches out, you adjust your pleats until the bottom of your bag fits perfectly. I know that a lot of people are concerned that pleats are hard, but I actually love pleats because they're much more forgiving in cases like this, where we're trying to make a bottom of a bag fit properly. So what I'm doing now is I am clipping my bottom piece to the bottom edge of the bag, and what I'm starting with first are all the center marks. So I had the 4 center marks on my bottom piece, and now I'm lining those up with the center marks that I made at the bottom of each of my panels. So each side panel has a center mark, your back panel has a center mark, and the front panel, it's actually this very center of your middle accent piece that would be your center mark. And I lost this. Okay. So now that I've clipped the centers, now I'm going to clip everything in between. And here's where, if I don't have a really good fit, I can make adjustments to my pleats so that the bottom fits perfectly. So start and clip everything in between 2 of your center clips. And it looks like this edge matches pretty nicely. So I don't have to make adjustments to any of the pleats here. And then you just continue clipping the bottom, the exterior bottom piece to the bottom edge of your bag. And again, this one matches pretty nicely, so I don't have to make any adjustments to my pleats. Okay, so I'm just going to finish clipping the rest. Okay, so the bottom is entirely clipped. I was lucky and I didn't have to make any adjustments to my pleats. So I'm now going to go over to the machine to sew the bottom on the bag. I'm going to sew it with the bottom of the bag laying on the bed of my machine, and that way there I can look to see how my pleats are being sewn on and make any adjustments that I need to make. Okay, so I've got the bottom of my bag on the bed of my machine. I've got the exterior body of the bag facing me at the top here. And I'm just going to slowly sew around. I take my time taking my clips off, and then I can adjust my pleats if I need to. don't want any puckers at my pleats. I want them facing straight up this way. Now, if you had the bottom of the bag facing up, you wouldn't be able to see your pleats and make adjustments like I'm doing right now. And that's how you sew on your bottom. I'm going to pause the video and finish sewing on the bottom, and then we're going to attach our main zipper at the top of the bag. I've got the bottom sewn on my bag. I'm just going to trim the seam allowance a bit now. I apologize for this boring part. Okay, got this out. Okay, so now I'm just going to turn my bag. Okay, and I have a look at my pleats. Very pretty. Okay, they look great. Very nice. Okay, now is the time to attach our zipper. Now, what I'm going to do actually is just going to clip my side seams together, and I'm going to double check my marks, make sure that my center marks end up at the ends and that my zipper marks are aligned, and they are. Okay, great. Just going to set this aside for a minute, and I'm going to get my zipper. Now we need to, at the opening of our zipper, we need to fold the ends. Because we don't want these ends. If you pulled right now, your zipper pull would come straight off. So I want to fold them so that that doesn't happen. What I usually do, I'm going to take this out. So what I usually start by doing is making a mark on both sides of the tape at exactly the same location. So, and it doesn't matter what the distance is, but give yourself at least 3/4 of an inch. And so I'm making a mark at the top and the bottom of the zipper tape. So I'm not sure if you can see that. I think, let me just adjust the lighting. Sorry. Okay, so I have a mark here and a mark here, and they're at exactly the same location, top and bottom of the zipper tape. So then what I want to do is pinch my zipper at the location of one mark, exactly like this. So it would be, I guess, wrong sides together. So you make this pinch, and then I want you to fold that pinch up, and at the same time you're curving the coil on the same side, and you bring that pinch up to meet the coil. So you see it makes this beautiful curved end to your zipper. And now you can either machine base stitch this in place, so just along the the outer edge here. You just need a few stitches to keep this in place, or if you find it too difficult to do with your machine, what you can do actually is just hand baste it. So use a regular sewing needle and just do a couple of basting stitches just to hold this in place. Now once I'm gonna pause, I'll go and I'll baste this in place so you can see what it looks like, and then we need to do the same thing on the other side of the tape. Okay, so I've got one side basted. I don't know if you can see, I tried to use black thread so it shows a little bit, and I did it just on the outer edge of the zipper tape, and that's what it's going to look like on the wrong side. This is the top. Now I have to do it exactly the same location on the other side. So I'm going to pinch it again and bring that pinch up, and I want to do it in a way where the folds here, the curves of my zipper tape are in exactly the same location. So you have to try to be as accurate as possible so that they're identical on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and baste this, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so here we are basted on both sides, and I tried to match the location of the curve as closely as possible. Now you're probably wondering, why do I not show this in the pattern? And the answer is simple: diagrams. I couldn't figure out how I would possibly show this in a diagram, and it's just easier to do it on a video instead. So now our zipper is ready to attach to the bag. So I'm going to take these clips off now, and you will start clipping your zipper to the right side. So you want them right sides together. So here I'm looking at the wrong side of my zipper, and I want this curved edge of my zipper to be aligned with that first zipper placement line. So I want the zipper placement line to be right here where the zipper coil is. And I'm going to clip it in place, and then I'm going to keep clipping the zipper all along this top edge. Fold your rectangle rings facing downwards at this point so that they're not in the way for the next few steps. And actually they should stay facing down until you turn your bag in the final step. Okay, I'm quickly trying to finish clipping this to the top edge. And when I get to the zipper placement line on the other side, we need to curve the zipper tape away from the top edge of the bag, because at some point I need the end of the zipper to not be sewn into the top seam allowance of the bag. So here I am, I'm at the zipper placement line on this side of the center line here, and I would just want to curve the zipper tape outwards, and at the location where I am doing this, make a mark on your zipper tape on the top and the bottom, because I want, when I'm installing the zipper on the other side of the bag, I want this part where the zipper curves out to be identical on both sides of the bag. Now in the pattern I do have zipper installation tips for success. Read that box very carefully. I'm going to be repeating them in the video, but those are really important tips to make sure that your zipper looks nice on this bag. If your zipper is not identical on both sides, so meaning if you didn't install it at the same position on both sides of the bag, that will result in when you see that wavy zipper, that's one of the causes. So you have to follow these tips and make sure that your zipper is even on both sides to avoid a wavy zipper. So I'm going to go over to my machine now, and I'm not going to sew this. I'm just going to do a basting stitch in case I need to make adjustments. Just a quick basting stitch for now. Okay, so the zipper is basted to the top edge of the bag, and like I mentioned, this part is lined up with the mark here, and then hopefully you can see this, but I angled the zipper tape outwards when I got to this line and continued my basting stitch just to make sure that it doesn't get back into the seam allowance. Okay, so now I need to do the same for the other side, and I did not baste the end of my zipper, and I really should have. Anyways, so now you open up your zipper, okay, almost all the way, leave the end closed, and then you're going to rotate the zipper so that the other side, and I messed that up. So this is what it looks like. You're flipping until the zipper tape is wrong sides together. And you do exactly the same that you just did. You start with the curved edge of your zipper at that zipper placement line. You clip it in place, and then you clip along the entire length, and then when you get to that second mark, you should have that line that you make, that mark that you made on your zipper tape should be at the same location, and again you angle out when you're base stitching here in this location. So I'm going to do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so I've basted both sides of my zipper, and now I want to check to see if I installed it fairly accurately. So you close the zipper, and then you want to look at the top edge to see if you have that wavy zipper. It's not 100% perfect, but it's not too awful, so I'm going to leave it. If you have a really wavy zipper, then just take off the basting stitches and try again until it looks fairly straight. Okay, and that is the end of this video. In video 5, we're going to assemble our lining and then put the exterior and the lining shells together.